Welcome to the Blonde Runner podcast with Coach Lora Erickson, where she shares her healthy living tips as a running and triathlon coach and mother of 4.
Hello, Coach Lora here, and today I wanted to talk about how to adapt a run training program. First, it's very important to have a training program, I think, to follow, especially if you're a beginner runner. So we are going to be particularly talking about the Ogden Marathon. I developed some training programs free for those people that are participating and signed up for the races. So if you haven't tapped into that yet, maybe you've signed up and didn't realize you can get a training program, you'll definitely want to check in on that. One of the reasons I think it's very important to follow a training program is it gives you structure and accountability. Oftentimes, especially if we're training for long races like marathons and things, we get tired in the training. And it's easy to kind of, if you're not really following a training, it's easy to decide you don't want to do something or don't want to do a long run or those important things. So if you have that training schedule, it's usually well planned out. A lot of training schedules are produced by training coaches or coaches like me that have a lot of experience. So I think it is important to have a training program. So you might be listening in and maybe you have a training program, a different training program, maybe not the one that I've written, but it's still important to have a training program. One of the things that you need to consider if you've gotten a generic training program online somewhere is that you have to consider what race you're doing and does it incorporate enough of what you need in. For instance, a lot of the races we do in Utah are downhill races, so you need to make sure you're training on hills. That's uphill and downhill is important even if you're racing downhill, which is a lot of what the Ogden Marathon is. So something to consider with your training schedule. So definitely look at that and your training and see you may need to adapt it more for your particular race. This training program was designed for this particular race, so that's something that you need to think about. One of the most common mistakes that I see when people are following a training plan is rarely do you ever get every single workout in as it's written. It is important to try to follow it as best you can, but realistically, in this training program I created was 18 weeks. You're probably going to miss a workout here or there for various reasons. Maybe it was you got sick, or maybe your kids were sick and you had to deal with something you didn't expect to deal with, maybe an emergency. Could have been poor planning on your part in terms of training, getting things ready, or the day runs out and you didn't get your workout in, so poor planning. So a lot of reasons we can miss a workout. One of the mistakes I see people making is if you miss a workout, you just add it to the next one, right? So let's say you missed a 5 or 6 mile run and then you're going to do 4 or 5 the next day or the next or whatever, then you just add them together and that makes up for it. Not necessarily. Obviously, that's going to have a different toll on your body than just doing the workout. So I suggest for the most part, you probably could, if you miss a workout, it could be an extra rest day. That's totally what I suggest, and then just stick to the rest of the training program. Some people do plug it, maybe they'll use it as a rest day and then plug that workout into their rest day. But the way that I've just structured training, I have a rest day after a long run, that it could mess up your training a little bit. So really the best thing to do is if you miss a workout, just forget about it and move on. In the training programs that I've created, I do a lot of cross training in there. The reason for that is it gives you some say in what you're doing for training, and it gives you usually a lot of variety. That way you're not getting burnt out. For cross training, I always suggest doing non-jarring workouts, like elliptical would be good, doing a Pilates class, maybe going swimming, cycling, easy hike, walking with your friend. It's just movement. It's sort of a recovery day, but active recovery day. So that's what cross training is all about. It shouldn't be jarring, and then it gives you that freedom to do something a little different. Also keeps you fresh, keeps it exciting. You don't get to run every day. Now, when you're a more advanced runner running every day, maybe you want more mileage. Most of the training I do for myself and for a lot of the people I work with, I do have lower miles. It works well for me. It's worked well for a lot of people. So if you like a lot more miles, you can add those on, but you are risking injury. So it's always better to get to the starting line obviously not injured, and it's smart usually to go less mileage if you're less risk in that regard. So it's better to get to the starting line under-trained than injured, right? So getting to the start line is the key, and then feeling confident. You build that confidence through following a training plan. And then one of the other things with training plans, they don't really incorporate nutrition in, and most of them are just mileage plans. So that's something to consider and start planning in. I know with the program I created and with the Ogden Marathon, I have offered an upgrade where I do talk about a lot more of that stuff. There's a lot of coaches' notes that they get in the training, a lot more accountability online. So that's an option. Other things that you need to consider, most good training plans will have some type of interval or speed work incorporated in. Make sure that's in there. If not, add that to it. Hill work is another thing I mentioned before. You need to be incorporating that in. Things you need to be careful about is getting too much intensity too soon, as well as obviously too many miles. So make sure that there's a good build in that training where your body can adapt to it and it's not too much too soon. Most training plans usually tell you how many miles you need to be at when you're starting the plan, and mine are that way as well. So make sure that you're aware of what those are. Other things that I think are really important in a plan, and this is rarely in a plan, except this particular plan that I created does have this incorporated in, but it's incorporating racing into training. I think this is super, super important. This helps take a little bit of the pressure off the big race because you're already doing some racing within. It builds that confidence and you're able to test out what you're doing in training in a race environment. Sometimes it's hard to mimic that any other way, but to actually have it in a race. So with this race, I have incorporated the winter running series in the half marathon and marathon programs. So that is awesome because we already have those races worked in. So starting in February, there's a 5K. It moves to a 10K, and then we have it's a 10 miler and then a half marathon all through those months that build up to the May race. So depending on what training race you're doing or what program that you're doing, that may change. So the time of year is a little different for us in Utah. With a May marathon or half marathon, whatever you're training for, if it's a fall, that's going to change. You're going to be running in the heat. It's going to be a little different for you. So that's another thing to consider with a training program. Other things that you should make sure to incorporate in, and I highly encourage this with my training, is a dynamic warm-up. I do have a video on that. You can certainly ask me about that, and many of you, I believe, already have a link to it, and that can be found on Facebook. I also have a core and strength routine that can be found on my Instagram, and I highly encourage that. So making sure you have those things incorporated in any kind of training. If they don't have those in there, then I think incorporating them in is really good. Other things that you don't always plan for is vacation and things like that. Vacation doesn't mean, hey, I don't have to run at all. Matter of fact, it means, yeah, you get to run in a different place. So maybe on the beach, right? So training plans, and what's great about running is you can run anywhere. So with the exception of sometimes in maybe foreign countries that don't seem as safe, you may have to incorporate some indoor work, and you may not have a gym. So when those things happen, you may consider hiring a coach or working with, maybe I do consultations all the time, and I've done that before for people when they have a training schedule they're following, but we need to adapt it a little based on them. And so I've done that before. So something to consider as well. Those things happen, and those are some of the ways that you can adapt training. Again, just if you miss it, just skip it, stay on track as much as you can, I think, with any training, and you'll be better off. So hopefully that helps, and until next time, live well.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. Be sure and check the show notes for resources or links that we mentioned in the show. You can also find them on my website at BlondeRunner.com. BlondeRunner.com. You can also find me on Instagram at TheBlondeRunner with an E, and Coach Lora Erickson, and that's Lora. Before you forget, I hope that you will follow this podcast and like it so you don't miss an episode. Also, it really helps if you leave a review so other people can find it, and share it with your friends. Until next time, live well.